Hey kids, welcome to the Onion Church of Christ Kids Time. Thank you for watching this week, and I just want to say I hope y'all are all enjoying these shows. I know we put a lot of effort into them, and I hope they all are enjoying them. This will be the last Kids Show for a little while, because me and my family are going out of town next week, and then after that, me and my dad are going to Louisiana so he can hold a gospel meeting. But anyways, thanks for watching. Let's sing some songs. The first one will be The Sea of Galilee. There's a sea, there's a sea, there's a sea in Galilee. There's a boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a boat, there's a boat, there's a boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's a man, there's a man, there's a man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There are hands in the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's hands in the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's hands, there's hands, there's hands in the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there are nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's nets, there's nets, there's nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there are fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. There's fish, there's fish, there's fish in the nets in the hands of the man in the boat in the Sea of Galilee. Good job, kids. That song is a little hard because I go a little fast. But the next song will be The Gospel Chariot. Everyone knows how you do this. Roll the gospel chariot along. We will roll the gospel chariot along. Roll the gospel chariot along, and we won't tag along behind. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick him up. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick him up. If a sinner's in the way, we will stop and pick him up, and we won't tag along behind. If the devil's in the way, we will roll right over him. If the devil's in the way, we will roll right over him. If the devil's in the way, we will roll right over him, and we won't tag along behind. Good job, kids. That song makes me out of breath. You know what the next song is going to be? We do it every single week, and we hope that y'all know them by now. It's the books of the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the letters to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians,
1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus and
and Philemon,
Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, Jude and Revelation.
Good job, kids. Y'all guys know what time it is? It's Bible story time. Who remembers the story from last week?
I remember it.
What was it?
It was when Moses crossed the Red Sea.
That was from like 4 weeks ago.
Oh.
This week's Bible story is about how Paul got shipwrecked.
And thank you to Free Bible Images.
Thank you to Free Bible Images for letting us use these images because they're really nice.
Acts chapter 27 tells of Paul's shipwreck. When the time came for Paul to face trial in Rome, he and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, who was the captain of the imperial regiment. They set sail, and on the next day they docked at a place called Sidon. Julius kindly let Paul go ashore to visit his friends, and his friends took care of him. Putting out to sea again, they encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course. In passing by Cyprus, they sailed along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, landing at a place called Myra. The commanding officer found an Egyptian ship that was bound for Italy and put Paul and the other prisoners on board. After several days of slow and difficult sailing, finally they neared a place called Cnidus. However, the wind was against them, so they sailed south to Crete and finally arrived at a place called the Fair Havens. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel, and Paul spoke to the ship's officers. "I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well." But the ship's captain wanted to set sail. Since the Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, most of the crew wanted to sail up the coast to Phoenix, which was more sheltered, and spend the winter there. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete, but the weather changed abruptly, and a northeaster, a wind of typhoon strength, swept across the island and blew them out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. They bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They also lowered a sea anchor down to slow the ship down. The next day, as the gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard as well. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone, and no one had eaten for a long time. Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not left Crete, but take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of God stood by me and said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul, for you must stand trial before Caesar. God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage. We will be shipwrecked on an island.'" About midnight, one of the 14th night of the storm, the sailors sensed land was near, so they dropped a weight of line and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A little later they measured it again and found it was only 90 feet deep. They were afraid they would be driven against the rocks along the shore, so they threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. The sailors planned to abandon the ship by lowering the lifeboat. But Paul said to the commanding officer and the soldiers, "You will all die unless the sailors stay aboard." So the soldiers cut the ropes of the lifeboat and let it drift away. Just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone, "Please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair of your heads will perish." Then he took some of the bread and gave thanks to God and offered a piece of it to everyone, and they all ate. 276 people on board were encouraged and began to eat. The crew lightened the ship further by throwing the cargo of wheat overboard. And when morning dawned, they didn't recognize the coastline. It was the coastline of a small place called Malta. When they saw a bay with a beach, they wondered if they could get the ship to run aground. They made way for the harbor, for the shoreline. They cut off the anchors and they lowered the rudders. They raised the foresail and headed toward shore. But it hit a shoal and ran the ship aground too soon. The bow of the ship stuck fast, while the stern was repeatedly smashed by the force of the waves and began to break apart. The soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners to make sure they didn't swim ashore and escape. However, the commanding officer, wanting to spare Paul, stopped them. He ordered all who could to jump overboard and swim and make for land. The others had to hold on planks of debris from the broken ship. Just as the angel had said, everyone made it safely to shore, including Paul. Oh wow, kids, isn't that a great story? Can you imagine being on a ship while the ocean is just tearing the back of the boat up? Can you imagine what it must have been like? Even the sailors were afraid. Ooh, and Paul had to go through that, but he eventually made it through that and made it all the way to Rome. That's where his life ended, was in Rome. But Paul did a lot of good work during his lifetime, did a lot of good work even while he was in Rome, after he got to Rome. Thank y'all so much for watching these Kid Time videos every week. I know that several people have commented or sent me messages and saying how much their little ones enjoy it. And we appreciate you allowing your little ones to watch it. Like Cooper told you just a few minutes ago, this will be the last Kids Time for a few weeks because we'll be on vacation next week. Then we'll come home for a week, and then I'll be going to a Holy Gospel meeting in Louisiana. And after that, if we're not back at regular meeting for Bible classes, we might come back with some more Kid Time. We'll just have to kind of play that by ear and see what it's looking like by the end of the month of July. But we appreciate you joining in with us and watching, and we just appreciate all of those who have commented and sent me messages and showed me pictures of their kids singing along with Singing Time, and hopefully you enjoy the story time too. But just thank y'all so much. We're going to sing one more song, and then we'll close out Kids Time for today. The song is Jesus Loves Me. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Thanks for being here, kids. Thanks for watching along. We'll see you next time.